Hey, aloha, and welcome to my Aloha Friday lunch hour. Stan, Energy Man here. Stan Osserman from the Hawaii Center for Advanced Transportation Technologies, High Tech Development Corporation, Department of Business, Economic Development, Tourism. That's the legal disclaimer. Anyway, glad to have you guys here today. Going to be an interesting show. What I want to do is start off this show a little bit today, going back to the Earth Day Dallas that I went to with Blue Planet and Paul Pontio about 2 weeks ago, because I didn't have any graphics for you then, but I pulled up some pictures and I wanted to show you some of the pictures. So we'll throw them up there, and I'll start talking about what we saw. One of the first things that I did when I got there was I sat in on a summit. And the reason that I just took a picture of the sign, the folks inside had about 25 or so in there, and they were a little picky about taking photos inside. But what was kind of interesting was the Lieutenant Governor of Texas and the Railroad Commissioner were there. And you go, okay, Lieutenant Governor, I can kind of figure. Railroad Commissioner? Well, in Texas, the Railroad Commissioner runs all the energy. And why were both of those two folks a big deal there? Well, if you take the economy of Texas, the economy of Texas ranks among the biggest economies in the world, not just the United States, but it's definitely one of the larger, if not the largest in the United States, and one of the largest compared to most countries in the world. So to have the Lieutenant Governor there, and their energy czar essentially, talking about the benefits of hydrogen and how they were looking to hydrogen to help solve some of their issues in Texas that revolve around energy, and the fact that they're a natural gas and oil state, sent a huge message to everyone. And we're looking to Texas to be one of the states leading us into the clean energy revolution. So it was great to be part of that summit. The next photo we got is another picture, and I thought this was really cool and something that we could do here in Hawaii. Just like in Kaka'ako, where we have powwow and the artists come from all over the world and do graphics on all of our buildings in Kaka'ako, this is what they did in Texas. And the next slide shows some more. They have some dumpsters that local artists went and painted the dumpsters. They all have some kind of sustainability or energy friendly theme to them. But that's something I thought was really cool, and maybe some of the folks here in Hawaii could do, some of the local artists, or the kids in the schools. If you've ever been to the Capitol and seen the artwork that some of our students, high school students, do, it's just amazing. So I thought that was really neat, something we could do in Hawaii. The next thing that I have on tap is this is a solar cooker, and it's pretty amazing. This thing was set up in the middle of what they call the tiny house display, and there were 130,000 people at this Earth Day thing in Dallas. But this thing was cooking bacon all day long, and it's like, it smelled bacon all the way through. People were going crazy, but they were cooking bacon on this cooker, and it was just really sizzling away. And it wasn't a hot day in Texas. It was in the mid 70s, maybe got to the low 80s, and this thing was just sizzling away just from that little cooker. So that's one of the things that they were showing off. And then there's the tiny homes. The tiny homes had lines in front of them every single day, the whole time they were up. I never even got to go inside these things because the lines were so long. But they have air conditioning, and they have stoves and toilets and sinks, and they're about 300 square feet each, and they're becoming really popular. So the next slide, I think, has got the power. This is on the right-hand side there. That box provided all of the electrical energy to 5 of the tiny homes. So that's a miniature electrolyzer and battery storage. Capacitors, those blue things under the black box, are called capacitors, and they'll take care of spikes in the power from any of the units there. Then there's an inverter and a distribution bus. The orange thing's a distribution bus. Behind on the backside is some storage for hydrogen. So the thing uses photovoltaics, and whenever it has extra electricity, it makes hydrogen, stores the hydrogen in the propane containers on the backside, and then when it needs power, it takes the hydrogen and gives you long-term power when, like nighttime or when the clouds come over the unit. That unit there costs, with the photovoltaics for a house, about $40,000. So if you can imagine, just like a big cell phones that were clunky and big, I expect that technology is going to get down to the size of a small refrigerator and probably be in the $5,000 to $10,000 price range within the next few years. So you can look forward to coming off the grid if that fits your lifestyle. Some of the other stuff that was out there that was really neat to see were some vehicles. They had a Polaris side-by-side quad that was running off of hydrogen. And the next slide is right next to it, you can see the yellow thing. I didn't take a picture of it, but there's actually a big riding lawnmower. And this is a motor scooter. I mean, technically a motor scooter, but it's the size of a motorcycle. And I was afraid to get on it and ride it because it was too powerful. I mean, the thing really had a lot of torque, and I was afraid I would just, trash that thing the first 30 feet I would be driving it. But just some amazing things, all running off of hydrogen and electric drive. Just amazing stuff. The next slide shows some of the things you can do at home. The big box is actually a little electrolyzer that you can make hydrogen with in your house. And the small box, and also the unit sitting on, laying down on the table to the right, is a little fuel cell that takes the hydrogen and turns it back into electricity. So you can charge your cell phone, your computer on the go, and that little bit of hydrogen that's in that little canister that slides in there will cover your computer for probably 4 or 5 days. It's a pretty amazing little setup, and I'm not here selling that stuff. In fact, I don't even know much about the company, but you might want to check them out. It's really cool equipment. But that's a scale, the homeowner scale of some of the technology that's out there today using hydrogen. The next shot is my last one. And the gentleman standing in the background there in front of that stainless steel container, that stainless steel container is an entire hydrogen fueling station all in one little container. And we're actually going to get a unit similar to that here in Hawaii at HCAT on Cook Street, probably within the next 30 to 60 days. They're going to come and install one out there, and we'll have the first outside the fence line hydrogen station on Oahu from that company called Millennium Rain. And that unit takes water and electricity and converts it into hydrogen, stores it, and pressurizes it, and will dispense it into a vehicle. So I can actually fuel vehicles for the state using that. We're going to primarily use it for the vehicles we convert for the Air Force, but we'll have hydrogen available right on Cook Street for when vehicles start coming out. So that's a little bit of what we did in Dallas, Texas a couple weeks ago. But the real guest for today is Mr. Todd Daniels from MilTech. That's a company that we work with out of Montana State University, and we use MilTech services to help vet some of the technologies that we're looking at for our microgrid system at Hickam. And I asked Todd to come and talk to us a little bit today about some of the challenges that you have when technology is changing so quickly, and how do you get companies like into the manufacturing mode or vet them to make sure they can actually manufacture what they've produced or developed. How does that whole system work? Because technology is changing so quickly, and that's going to start impacting the rest of the market when we start developing new technology for energy systems and what you use in your house. So Todd, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on board. Thanks for working a little late tonight over in Montana and spending some time with us.
Well, certainly it's my pleasure and an honor to be on your show today, Stan. I appreciate you having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about what got you excited about doing engineering work, and tell us a little bit about what it's like to be an industrial engineer working for MilTech, and what lights your fire about doing what you do.
Well, that's a very good question, and I'll tell you one thing that I always reflect on, especially working with MilTech and being an industrial engineer, is there are wonderful, very smart people out there. It gives me hope. And I get to meet a lot of these very intelligent folks and see what they're doing and apply some of my skills as an industrial engineer to help them move their technology forward. So it's very rewarding to be able to help to apply techniques in industrial engineering or manufacturing engineering or design engineering to help move the technology forward. And that's the term that we use, or at MilTech and I use, is technology transition, moving that from concept to commercialization. And everything in between that is that technology transition definition.
Great, so you're kind of like the engineer of all trades. You have to know electrical engineering and civil engineering and mechanical engineering and chemical engineering, at least enough to be dangerous, and then you pull it all together for folks.
Exactly. As they've said, the jack of all, master of none.
Okay. All right, well, we got some slides that you sent us that you can get into and start talking to. So give us an idea of what kind of work you actually do.
You bet. And again, thanks for letting me do this. And you'll find as we go through this information, I've titled this One Man's Perspective on Technology Transition. Please don't use my definitions as the Webster definition.
Okay.
But you'll see that I try and do things in simple terms, so it's simple minds coming up with simple terms in here. So
So
watch out for
Todd's music collection is up on the screen right now.
yeah.
So
So yeah, one of the things that I did when we were talking and thinking about transition that might be helpful is to relate it to things that we use and technology that's around us every day. And before we started talking today, I was talking to Stan about moving, and we're actually now in the process of moving our home. And as you do that, you start to unpack things and see what you have as you start to put them into boxes and you transition to your new home. And we're really trying to downsize. And as we're doing this, I started to put everything in kind of a similar area. And I started to find old 45s that we had and that my wife had, and some of the LPs that were laying around. And believe it or not, we even had some cassette tapes laying around. And of course, there was our CD collections. And then over in a dusty corner, I found one of the original iPods that came out back in 2001. And as I was looking at all these different media of music that I had in front of me, I was not only scratching my head going, man, I spent a lot of money on 45s and cassettes, and now I'm not using them. But it started me thinking about technology. And in this case, I did a little research, did the old Wikipedia sort of thing, and looked at when was this technology invented? And if you look on this slide on my music collection, you can see the LPs or records as we saw them, or we know of them, really were invented back in about 1888.
right.
Yep. And then around the 60s, and obviously this is not a timeline of everything that's out there.
You got the 8 tracks in there right alongside the cassettes and
Yep.
reel-to-reel tape recorders, and yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there too.
Exactly. And my wife said, you better put those 8 tracks in there, because there's going to be people that are going to want to talk about 8 tracks. But the 8 tracks came around about the time of the cassettes, and then the CDs came around in 1982-ish, and then that iPod in 2001, and around 2007 is when the iPhone came out. And for me, what I started doing is going, reflecting back on my music collection here, going, when the cassette tape came out, it really killed what I was doing with regards to records. I slowly transitioned, stopped buying records, and started buying cassettes. And in that same period of time, I slowly transitioned out of a record player into a cassette player. So the new technology of a cassette in my world kind of killed the record technology. And then as I moved forward, I saw that same pattern happening with each of these technologies. When I got into CDs, I bought a CD player, and slowly I started weaning myself off of cassettes, and the next thing you know, I didn't have a cassette player. And as we move forward through time, each one of the technologies supplanted the previous technology or killed that technology. And as I was thinking about technology transition and this presentation that we're talking about today, I thought this is a great example of how technology affects us personally, and then how does this affect those people developing the technology. And one of the tools that I learned several years ago, is a tool called, or a concept called, the product life cycle. So if we look at the next slide on this.
Yeah, it's up.
Okay, the next slide is a very simple representation of the product life cycle. Now, if you go Google and look up the product life cycle, you're going to see all sorts of curves and all sorts of graphical representation of this. So this is my product life cycle curve, and it may look a little different than what you would find out there. In fact, there's an excellent article written by the Harvard Business Review called Darwin and the Demon, and it really gets into what this curve really looks like. But in any case, this is a real simple representation to show us, look, products, what they do is they go through a development cycle, and This is the engineering, the design, the development, the prototyping of a product or a service. And then with respect to sales, as we move across from left to right, that's time across the bottom of this graph. As we move across time, we're slowly introducing this product out into the market and sales start to increase. This is where we have the early adopters, the people that go, hey, I want to be involved with this technology.
And right along with that curve goes like riding a bicycle. The first part of the curve is nice and flat because you're all excited in development. And then you have to do introduction and growth, and that's where all the real hard work and all the money comes in, and the investing and the tooling. And it's an uphill climb and climbing and climbing. Then you finally mature the thing, and then you're on the downhill already.
Exactly. And what's really interesting about that whole curve is you can apply that to most any product and service. In fact, it's really hard to find something that doesn't follow that curve.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick break here and be back with you shortly, Todd, and you can tell us what happens. But the one thing I've noticed, and after your discussion and introduction, is that curve gets compressed, is what it tells me. So we'll come back and talk about that right after this break.
Aloha, how you doing? I'm Gordo the Tech Czar here on ThinkTech Hawaii, where we co-host Hibachi Talk, where we talk about technology and bring in all kinds of cool guests. Also, my co-host with me today is
Andrew the security guy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching ThinkTech Hawaii, and thanks for watching Hibachi Talk. We also have Angus.
Hello there, lad. It's Angus. I bring in all kinds of wee things. Oh, look, you can see my lips moving.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on ThinkTech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy María Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawaii en ThinkTech Hawaii cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Hey, welcome back to Stan the Energy Man on the Friday before Mother's Day. So if you haven't bought your Mother's Day card yet, and you haven't bought stuff for your mom, you better get out there before it gets too late. You got after work today and all day tomorrow, so don't forget. Anyway, back with Todd Daniels from MilTech in Montana, coming to us live and direct from Montana, talking about what it takes to move technology forward in the real world. And we're talking about music to start with, but that was just an analogy for everything, because really these same patterns follow everything that technology goes along with, including energy. And what we're facing, trying to transition from fossil fuels to more user-friendly, earth-friendly fuels. So Todd, take it away.
You bet. And right before break, we were talking about the product life cycle, and you made a great observation there, Stan, about this time being compressed. The product life cycle that we looked at shows these bars at equal time lengths, but in the real world, they're completely different, and they can be longer or shorter depending on the technology that we're working on or the industry. And as you indicated, what's happening now, which is a very, very interesting time to be alive and be around, is to see that this cycle gets compressed quickly. And to relate that to energy, I'm going to move to the next slide, where we have a nice little graphic that I pulled off the internet here yesterday. This is showing the evolution of wind turbines over time. And it is showing us how big these turbines have become and how much power they generate. And if we look down on the bottom of this, we look back at 1985, and the largest turbines that were being produced at the time were 15 meters in diameter, and they were generating around 0.5 megawatt. Do you remember those, Stan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we follow that curve going forward, we see that it takes about 7-8 years into the mid and early 90s before we start seeing these turbine blades and these turbines getting larger. If we fast forward all the way to 2001, 2002, now we're looking at turbines that are 112 meters in diameter. And it takes maybe another 3 years before we see one that's 126 meters. So we're starting to see these turbines become larger and larger and larger in a shorter time span. So back to what Stan said earlier about the compression of time, we're seeing these new products, in this case, a new evolution of the wind turbine coming out faster and faster and faster.
And I think having that airplane graphic right next to the 160-meter wind turbine and 8 to 10 megawatts, just to give people some perspective, I expect my entire microgrid at Hickam to be 8 megawatts. So you're telling me that right now, technology has a single wind turbine that could generate all of the power I need for my entire microgrid, but it's 160 meters in diameter.
That's right.
That is huge. And, you know, one thing I didn't mention earlier when I was talking about Texas was Texas actually is the largest user of wind power in their grid system. They're up to 20% of their state's power is generated by wind, and they're the largest in the United States. And I don't think people recognize that because of that time compression mode we talked about. I think the technology has come up so quickly that Texas has like leaped into the lead on wind power, and your graph picked it up right there. I mean, there's a living example. Texas is 20%. They're ahead of Hawaii. We're about 18% solar, and we've got some wind. They're 20% just wind. That's amazing.
Isn't it incredible? And then to think about this, to make these moves over time, we may not think about what it takes to go from 126 meters to 160 meters, but there is a lot of effort in that process. And years ago, I had the opportunity to listen to a fellow from Cincinnati that was converting his machine shop into a blade manufacturing shop for these turbines. And he said the biggest challenges at the time, and this is probably late 2008, 2009, he said, number one, I can't make consistent blades. I can't make the composites consistent over the size of this long blade. He had to develop new machinery and new technology in order to scale it up. It was the same thing, but just on a larger scale, and it caused that technology, the machinery and manufacturing issues to be the problem or the barrier.
Exactly. And balance on these things is critical. Anything that moves in a circle is got to be in balance, especially on a large scale like that. And what a lot of people don't realize, and we have wind turbines on Oahu and Maui, and when you look at them, they look nice and graceful, like they're just kind of slowly spinning. You know, at the hub, they're probably only doing a couple RPM. But you got to realize that the tip of those turbines, those blades are spinning at over 200 miles an hour. It doesn't seem like it, but that's the speed. And when you start thinking about what does that mean in terms of an airfoil? Well, if you start going, you know, up in the supersonic range like you do for some other turbines, you have a whole nother set of dynamics. And in between where we're at now and supersonic, there's other issues. There's vibrations and harmonics and things that kick in when you start scaling up to that big and that fast. So you're right, the manufacturing when you get into this level is really amazing.
Well, and to that end, you know, as we said earlier, I know enough to be dangerous. That change of those larger blades to even larger blades have an impact on that turbine and that engine and the forces that are there. And so my industrial engineering term there is it's a lot more, right?
Highly technical term.
That's right.
It's way bigger.
It's way bigger. Excellent. So I'm going to move to the next one and kind of bring this back to what we were looking at on the music side of things. This gives you an example, as we said earlier, when I took the record technology and I moved to CDs, there was 94 years of previous technology. There was that product life cycle of 94 years that's being killed by that CD. So when I started replacing the CDs with what I put on my iPod, it was 19 years between that and the iPod. So you see the product life cycle is now being compressed. And then when I finally started putting all that music on from my iPod to my phone, that was a 6-year cycle. So this right here is showing you how those cycles of that product life cycle get compressed, as you were saying earlier, Stan.
So you have a time compression, but you also have the complexity of going to a manufacturing scale and doing all the other things that it takes to take a technology from the discovery and development stage into the getting it in the marketplace stage, but your compression is accelerating. So what kind of challenges does that present to companies trying to catch up in energy and trying to replace older technology when it's changing so quickly and things are so compressed?
It's a great question, and it's across the board on everything. It's across the board, and when I mean across the board, I'm talking about design. Imagine the designers and saying, now the cycle, your product life cycle now is 6 years. Or if you work at Apple, for example, they're continuing to replace their cell phone technology every 6 to 12 months.
And it's not because it's wearing out, it's becoming obsolete or not marketable because the newer, faster, flashier things catching on. So your cell phone still works, but it's starting to run new software and things, so you got to change it anyway.
So imagine yourself being in the design group where you just launched this project at Apple, and they turn around and they say, now you got 6 months to launch the next one.
Wow.
So you're looking at what's out there as far as materials. How can I design this? Who can I work with from a supply chain to help me effectively deliver in that short period of time? So there's a pressure cooker in that first stage of that product life cycle. And that's why I wanted to show the whole life cycle so you could see, boy, that first front end of it, that's being compressed, as you said, but there's a lot that's happening in that area. To pull this back one more slide, and I know that this next one is very, very difficult to see and read, but this is a slide that you can get from NREL, and I see from past shows that we've talked about NREL in the past. And what this slide is showing is the efficiency of technology, solar technology, over time. And what I mean by that is, how can this cell or this device take the sun's energy and convert it into energy that we can use? So in this chart, and please don't feel like you have to read it or understand all of it, but there's some blue lines across the middle where it goes clear back to 1975, and it shows how we've changed and fixed and improved the silicon technology that's used in photovoltaic cells. So we've gone from somewhere in the neighborhoods of about 13% efficient all the way up to about 27% efficiency. Well, what's really interesting in this data is there's a orange line with orange dots in there, and there's a new product called perovsky, and I might be pronouncing that incorrectly, but perovsky cells that came on the market about 4 or 5 years ago. And you can see the curve on that is very steep. It's gone from 12% efficiency all the way up to 22% efficiency. And all I'm trying to show you in this is this new technology may supplant what we already know. It's that product life cycle of something new coming in and potentially edging out the old existing technology that we've been working with for the last 30 years.
Yeah, that's a game-changing technology, and especially if you think, what's the potential for that to be even more and more efficient and get up into the 40 or 30 or 40% efficiency in photovoltaics. Where right now we're looking at in Hawaii, if we wanted to put PV on Oahu and cover all of our electric needs, we'd be putting a whole lot of PV out there. Probably every housetop and every vacant lot, every parking structure, and a whole bunch of ag land. But if you could make the product more efficient and get it to the 40 to 50% efficiency, holy mackerel, that's a game changer for everybody.
And the one thing that's very interesting about this that impacts us all, especially if we're thinking about that product life cycle curve, is years ago somebody told me that the market demands innovation, and I think that's true. But really, if we're looking at that curve, what the market demands is lower cost. We want that technology and we want it driven at lower cost.
Okay, well, we're coming up on our second break here, so we're going to take a quick break and come back right to that point of cost. One of the things we talked about in that roundtable in Texas with the Lieutenant Governor was if the technology's not self-sufficient, sustainable, and have a practical business model, we probably shouldn't be going that way. So we're going to be back with Todd in a few seconds and talk to him more about sustainability and the price of this technology.
Here's the deal. I'm Jay Fidel. I'm the host of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, which is the Energy Policy Forum's program on Wednesday. That's how we call Wednesday Energy Wednesday. We call it Energy Wednesday every Wednesday. Are you surprised? Okay, and we try to get guys like Jim Alberts here from Hawaiian Electric who can tell us what's really going on in energy. We want to be informed. It's so important. It's the most important initiative in our state. Clean energy is major, okay? And that's why we cover it on this show. That's the deal. What do you think, Sharon?
I think that's great. That's why we're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5, and we hope you all join us so we can hear people like Jim coming on our show and co-host Ray Starley from Hawaii Energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here today. You've seen this. You heard what she said. What do you think?
I think it's a tremendous opportunity for people to come together and talk about the issues. Oftentimes, there isn't a good forum to bring these key issues out into the public, and this is a tremendous way to go about it. And the activity of this show is essential to keep talking about energy because, as you said, it's such an essential part of our lives that we need to pay attention to it and we need to think about the future.
Okay, Ray, your turn.
Welcome back to Stan the Energy Man on my lunch hour here on Friday, the 6th of April. May already. Oh my God, it's May already. Mother's Day weekend coming. So we're talking to Todd Daniels from over in MilTech in Montana, and we're talking about pricing and how that impacts the technology development cycle and how companies have to be able to grow and sustain themselves from a flat thing as they're accelerating their technology. And this brings to mind, Todd, when I first started in this job, everybody kept saying, well, Stan, what's the business model for hydrogen? Show me what it looks like. And I go, well, we don't have any vehicles and we don't have any hydrogen stations, so how do I show you a business model? And that kind of articulates the struggle that you have when you're on the front end of that cycle, curve that you showed. You're in that flat part where you've developed the technology, you've got it, but people want to know, okay, what is it going to cost me? How can I make money doing it? Is it going to be profitable? So that's where the challenge comes in because it gets down to money. When you start having to manufacture, you've got to put a lot of money into making dies and molds and all the hardware that goes along with manufacturing. So why don't you pick it up there with slide number 7 and talk about the price piece of this?
You bet. That's a great segue into it. And when you're new to the world on technology, that curve is a lot longer and a lot flatter. But this slide that we're looking at with regards to sales versus profit, this is just another look at that product life cycle, except what we've added in now is an orange line that shows the profit that a company deals with when they're rolling out a new product on this product life cycle curve. And as you indicated there, if you look at that line is going negative in the product development phase. That's where you're sticking money into this and betting on this thing, hoping that you've got a product that will take off and generate those profits as you introduce it and it grows in the market. And again, that time frame may be short or long compared to the other time frames in the product lifecycle phase. This is where we live, and this is where MilTech helps organizations because we call that's the technology transfer area, or sometimes it's the valley of death from getting a concept to commercialization.
Right, and HTDC up in Manoa, they kind of focus on that area with their incubators and with their accelerators and the folks in our not-for-profit sector that also do the same thing, trying to help find that critical funding that the company needs to start making the move into that valley of death and hopefully come out the other side with a marketable product that can start turning a profit, after they get through that critical phase, after they built their machinery, built up their manufacturing process, and are actually marketing and selling. And of course, how much of that is, how much that costs depends on what you're making. If you're making something that's pretty much software, you may not have as big of a investment, but if you're making boats or some big durable good, that could require quite a bit of machinery, robots, all kinds of space and things like that that cost money.
As you alluded to, it's not a simple thing, and there's many things happening in that curve, and I don't want to oversimplify it. There's a lot of things that take place to move that needle from point A to point B.
Okay, what's the next slide got for us there, Todd?
Next slide. One of the things that I really appreciate about what the Department of Defense has done is they put some definition to this. And again, it's a very busy slide. But what this one is showing us is these are kind of the steps that happen inside that product development phase. Meaning to move from start to finish of product development, there's assessing, hey, can I actually build this? Are there people out there? Are there materials out there? Or am I going to get into a situation where I'm working with something that's called unobtainium and I can't make it? Then we move into what are the risks of this? Are there supply chains out there? Do I have machinery or technology? Do I have the money and the financing to do this? So it's assessing those risks and then moving into what I'd call an engineering and manufacturing development. This is where people talk about prototyping, doing small production runs, seeing if we can actually make something that meets the requirements. It's verification and validation against what the people really want or what we're trying to achieve with this. Then we
let me point out too, before you get to operations and support, that on the bottom of the scale, and it's probably hard for the folks at home to see, but there's two lines with the pointy arrow-looking shapes underneath, and those are MRLs and TRLs, and we're familiar with that in what we do as manufacturing levels and manufacturing readiness level and technology readiness level. Those are actually terms that we use a lot in our industry. And when we have to sell something to the government or pitch it to a research lab, or, those terms are really important. So just for folks out there that are developing technology or developing a manufacturing process, you should probably look up MRL and TRL and be familiar with what those things mean along the scale of development, because that's important when you sell your product.
And an excellent observation, because those, again, a very good tool put together by the Department of Defense that can help you understand where you're at or where you should be at. And we're using those tools to help identify risks in technology. We're able to look at something and apply those tools, the MRLs or the TRLs, to say, well, we've got a technology that should be at point C on this timeline, but based on those questions, we're finding out that we're lagging a little bit, and that's the risk. And now we need to address that risk to move it back up at the same pace of everything else in the process. So to move to the next one, it breaks out. The next slide here that I have, I'm talking about. Sorry, here mine's not moving.
Okay, we've got the fidelity of product development phases.
Yeah. So if we were looking at each one of those MRLs, as Stan pointed out, there's a lot of stuff underneath it. And to me, it's a lot like that game that you go to the carnival and you're rolling the ball and there's a race. Everybody has its racehorse going across the field from left to right. Well, each one of those racehorses in this development phase represents things like design. Can we produce it? Another horse might represent the materials. Do we have the supplies? Do we have our suppliers lined up to be able to support what we're trying to do? Another horse might be, do we understand the costs? Because we have to look at those costs and compare it to what we're selling to. If not, we're not going to be profitable. We won't be around long. Do we have the financing? Do we have the equipment, the people, the facilities? And can we build it to the quality that's expected? Each one of those things is a racehorse in that game. And that's why we use tools like the MRL to say, are they all progressing at the same path?
Yeah, so if you even have one of those horses lagging behind, that could tube your whole project because it's going to hold you back. And no matter how well you're doing the material and supply piece and the finance piece, and maybe you've got all your manufacturing ready to go, but you got design flaws or you've got something else holding you back, it could tube your whole project.
You're exactly right. And in some cases too, we've found that it's actually a win if we find a problem in early on in any of these areas and we can't overcome it. It's okay to make it, as they say, a righteous kill of a design, so we don't continue throwing good money after bad, even though the other paths are progressing in our favor.
Yeah, and I guess it also gives you the opportunity too to actually save the project if you can focus in on that one trouble area and solve it quickly and catch it up to the rest. Then you can actually press forward.
Exactly right, and this is where we live at MilTech, and this is where I've lived in my career of an industrial engineer, is to say, let's go in and see where you're at on this path. Again, as you said, master of none, jack of all, but be able to have enough depth on any of these bullets or these racehorses to say, this is where the risk is, and let's find you somebody or find a solution to that risk.
Okay, I think the last couple slides here, wrapping it up, just kind of tell us about what MilTech's core competencies are. And you got them all listed, 1 to 7, perfect 7.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, those are our core competencies, and you can see they line up with those racehorses that we talked about. How can we go out and find you resources or find you solutions to materials, or help you with the design, look at costs? How do we reduce those costs? Can we find vendors for you? Can we help assess those vendors and review those capabilities? And are there project management within all of those processes that we can help with? And as I move to the second to last slide on this, one of the here's a couple of the tools that we use at MilTech. Certainly you can see where all of these new words like CAD design and SolidWorks and rapid prototyping, those are tools to help us move through some of those processes really quickly. Another tool that we use is a program called the NIST MEP network. That stands for the National Institute of Standards Manufacturing Extension Program. In fact, there's a NIST MEP center in every state, including Hawaii, which is under HTDC, called Innovate Hawaii, and they're very, very knowledgeable fellows over there.
Yeah, that's Wayne and Wayne. We call them Wayne Squared over at Innovate Hawaii.
I love those guys. And certainly, as you indicated earlier, we don't always know the answer, but we can find the answers by reaching out to subject matter experts. So those are some tools that we use.
All right. Well, you showed your last slide there popped up, and we'll take a good look at it. But
Yeah.
to bring it back to where we started with the music collection, starting with the two soundtracks on a 45 to where we're at today, there's Todd's future music collection on that last slide there.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, but I saw this the other day where they can embed this technology in your ear and you don't have to have a device.
Wow.
I don't know if that's next, but that could be the future of music.
Wow. Well, Todd, thanks so much for enlightening us on an aspect of energy and technology that we don't think about a lot, and that is the full life cycle of what it takes to get us there. And I would encourage folks to kind of review what you've talked about and put it in, think about things like batteries in terms of this life cycle, or a new technology, a new solar array or a new wind turbine, and think about the life cycle. Yes, you can make it, it's possible, but how about manufacturing costs and financing? And who are the people that can help you get through this transition? And it's gonna be somebody like Innovate Hawaii up in Manoa and HTDC that have the advisors, the mentors, and the experts that can help you get through that valley of death as you go into production of energy resources. So thanks for being with us today all the way from Montana. I really appreciate it. And next time you're out in Hawaii, we'll try and have you on live.
Excellent. Thank you again, Stan. I appreciate it.
All right. So that'll do it for this week. Don't forget it's Mother's Day. Go out and get your Mother's Day stuff and make Mom happy this weekend. Aloha, and we'll see you next week on Stan Energy Man.